Welcome to Walking with Spirit with Dr. Ruth Anderson on the International Angels Network. Today is Thursday, May 24, 2018. Tonight is week 3 of our 4-week mini-series on death, dying, and beyond. I'm your host, Ruth Anderson, and I'm coming to you from Colorado. This show has been pre-recorded, so we won't be taking any call-in listeners. Here at International Angels Network, we explore spirituality, angels, spirit guides, our loved ones on the other side, and much more. Our radio podcasts are available to you on Pocket Casts, Pinterest, Player FM, Castbox, Podtail, Podchaser, and now Podbean. These are all easy sites to use and make it really easy to listen to our archive shows. This episode of International Angels Network is sponsored by Holistic Light Rejuvenation Center. For more information, visit holisticrejuvenate.com. Sunday Sturgeon is the founder and CEO of Holistic Light Rejuvenation Center and one of our hosts. We're pleased to announce that International Angels Network is now also sponsored by Audible by Amazon. Get your free audiobook today. To redeem your copy, visit www.audibletrial.com/International Angels Network. If you're not familiar with near-death experiences or did not listen to my podcast over the last 2 weeks, I encourage you to listen to the archived podcasts from May 10 and May 17 on the International Angels Network. I would like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to listen in. This show is called Walking with Spirit. Walking with Spirit means consciously living in the physical realm connection to the divinity in the spirit realm and being open to all that they want me to experience. Every day I check in with my guides, sometimes seeking guidance, sometimes seeking connection, and sometimes seeking their healing abilities. Many days I receive lessons by hearing, seeing, or feeling signs coming in from the energetic realm. I never know what my day is going to look like or what the next learning might be. My example of walking with spirit today happened just this morning. I was spending time with Archangel Michael. I was confused because as I was preparing for this radio show, I had been reading the book Beyond the Veil to Heaven by Ward Barcafer Jr. He's our guest on the show today. I was confused because Ward's descriptions of heaven sounded somewhat similar, but somewhat different than what I had been taught about what I call the Cathedral of Souls. Archangel Michael assured me that there are indeed many different places and universes in the ethereal realm. He showed me that the Cathedral of Souls is a different place than what Ward, and I am assuming the Bible, describe as heaven. So thank you, Archangel Michael, for that clarification. I'm going to take a few minutes to describe for you that which I have seen about the Cathedral of Souls, and then we will have Ward join us to talk about what he has learned from his wife, Suzette, about heaven. The Cathedral of Souls is one of the residences for souls in the afterlife. It consists of vibrational frequencies, 7 levels, each level having a distinct energetic level. Level 1, the highest and lightest of the vibrational frequencies. And then we range all the way down, literally going downward to level 7 with the lowest and densest vibrational frequencies, and levels 2 through 6 in between them. The vibrations and the visual aspects of each level are significantly different. I'm going to spend my most time today talking about levels 6 and 7 because there seem to be a lot of folks today who don't believe that there is such a thing as hell. And my friends, I beg to differ. During one meditation, I sat with Archangel Azrael, who's the Archangel of Death. I was asking yes-no questions about life in the afterlife and the Cathedral of Souls. I asked, do you deal with lower level energy as well as the higher level energy? I heard yes. Again, I could sense that the different levels went from the highest to the lowest, and this archangel was equally comfortable in each of the levels, which is why I was feeling lower level energies around him. I asked, is the lowest level seen as bad? I heard no. Is the whole purpose of coming back lifetime to lifetime to keep working your way up the levels to get to level 1? He said no. I said, if a person starts out on the lowest level, are they relegated to returning over and over to that lowest level? He said no. I asked, once a person is at the level they want to stay at, do they have to come back in another life? No. Are all of these levels called the Cathedral of Souls? Yes. I was picturing an apartment building with different levels. Instead of one front door and an elevator to the various levels, I was picturing each level being entered by a different corridor. When in the Cathedral of Souls, can a soul travel from one level to another? No. Do souls ever think about souls that are on other levels? Yes. Do they actually feel longing and ever miss them? No. After that last question, I was being pulled abruptly out and back to God. That was all I was supposed to be shown at that particular time. So later, with much more information under my belt, this is some of what I know of each of the levels of the Cathedral of Souls from different times in meditation. Level 1 has the highest vibrational frequencies and has the brightest, whitest look of any of the levels. The whiteness was blindingly white to my human eyes. It is for very highly evolved souls who also know Christ. Now, don't get upset that only one level of the Cathedral of Souls is set aside for Christians in particular, because I have seen that what Ward describes as heaven is set aside for those who know Christ. Level 1 of the Cathedral of Souls is for souls who have spent a lifetime being in alignment with their higher selves, spirit, loving the light, and trying to do good things for mankind. Down a level, level 2 is souls that are highly evolved, but who don't know Christ. They have very high morality and have done very good things for mankind. The vibrational frequencies are very high, but not quite as high as level 1, and the color is white, but with just a tiny hint of beige, such as an Apache white, compared to a very, very vibrant white. Levels 3, 4, and 5 are where the majority of souls end up who are in the Cathedral of Souls. Level 3 is what you would think are pretty upstanding folks with morals and conscientiousness intact. The color is a bit dingier white than level 2. As we head down the levels, the vibrational frequencies become denser, and as a result, the morality, integrity, and conscious understandings begin to disappear. Level 4 has souls demonstrating tendencies with less morality and attributes such as selfishness and bigotry. The color and atmosphere are browner than the dingy white of level 3. It made me think of a city with air pollution. My time in level 5 was exceedingly short. I was given only the briefest introduction through meditation. The atmosphere was darker brown with a bit of black haze. It was difficult to see, but not impossible. I remember that the souls here were void of any conscience. They were very happy to lie, cheat, and steal. Pretty much anything went. And I understood it was silly of me to have higher expectations of them than that. There was no overseer, parent, or police on duty. I did not sense any level of spirituality, just souls with no conscience. Another time, during meditation, I went to God for another lesson, as I knew I had not learned everything there was to know about life after life. As of yet, I had not seen level 1, which I assumed to be heaven, or level 7, which I assumed to be like hell. At this point, I didn't know what I didn't know, what else there was for me to experience and share with others. I was quickly led off down a corridor. I was alone, and I found myself on a green grass path. It looked lovely. I was in nature. The occasional bird was chirping, and the warmth of the sun was on my back. I breathed in the clean air of this idyllic setting. Where was I? Was this path going to lead to level 1 or heaven? Within minutes, the sky turned cloudy. My picturesque surroundings were changing drastically. Everything became dark gray overhead. Soon my grass path turned into gray rocks and finally huge boulders. I continued pushing forward. My previous thought that I would be seeing heaven was dimming quickly. The air was getting heavier, as if with moisture before a menacing storm, and my breathing became labored. Seemingly out of nowhere, a bolt of lightning struck nearby and almost hit me. The electrical tension reverberated through my jaw and limbs. I felt my heartbeat quicken, although I knew at any minute I could bring myself back from my meditation. Where was I? I was both curious and apprehensive that I was going to be shown hell. I was reminded of the dark, low-level energy that I had seen one time before in meditation. I remembered the murky black atmosphere that was virtually impossible to see through. I recalled feeling gut-wrenchingly vulnerable, unable to see what or who was approaching me with no means of defending myself. The overall feeling was of immense anarchy, void of any morality. It seemed that the souls in this level were capable of cognitive thought and used it to take advantage of each other, do nefarious activities against each other, and take pleasure in their ability to do so. I felt the internal fight to defend myself from the unsure but imminent onslaught. I had no fear of dying, but more a sense of dread at continuing to stay alive and experience an eternity of more of the same. I remembered seeing fires with beings around them worshiping low-level evilness, assumedly Satan. In hindsight now, I hypothesized that I had been seeing level 6, not the lowest of the levels in the Cathedral of Souls. I still not had experienced level 7. In meditation, I was on edge and on full alert. I waited and waited, but I was not sure for what. The sky was a heavy dark gray, although I could still make out things in my field of vision. I felt an ominous presence approaching me from in front. Suddenly, a huge blackbird, about 5 feet in length and 3 feet in width, flew toward me and almost hit me. I could feel the feathers of its underbelly as it grazed my head. I had not shrunk in size, but the bird was immense. Our proportions were almost laughable. Common everyday items in this realm do not necessarily look like what we are used to. Things might look familiar, but they can be tweaked to be whatever a mad mind wants to make up at the expense of the others involved. My attention shifted back to my place in meditation. Still standing in dark gray nothingness, I asked out loud, "What am I seeing? This isn't scary enough for hell. Is there a purgatory? Is this purgatory?" I saw the symbol of the no sign, a large red circle with a red diagonal line through it. The universal no symbol started out small and got bigger as it approached me until it was as big as I was, and then it disappeared. I found this approach to communication to actually be quite humorous. Once again, my attention was drawn back to my body with pounding and pressure in my sinuses over my eyes. The vision of the different levels in the Cathedral of Souls was shown to me, and I remembered that I had been told earlier that what some people reference as purgatory is being in the wrong level, wanting desperately to get moved to a different level. Once again, I had searing pain in my right eye and front forehead. Is this a clearing of my sinuses or my transmedium channel? I felt enormous pressure on my nose and forehead. Where am I? I felt completely alone. God, why am I in here? What am I to learn? I understood that I was to stay in meditation if I wanted to learn. I had throbbing of my right temple, left temple, nose, and finally my entire forehead. The gray sky got even darker and more opaque. My vision was as limited as if I was completely fogged in. I couldn't see anything. I could barely see my own hand. The gray turned to black, opaque. The air became exceedingly muggy and thick, making it increasingly harder to get a full breath. The atmosphere around me had become a murky black, yet not completely pitch black. Out of the opaque black, a shape came towards me. It was something like a flying dragon-type object with a long flowing tail. The only word I could use to describe it was a flying dragon. It was about 2/3 the height of me with a long flowing tail that went on for about 10 feet. I heard the swoosh of its tail as it went by me. It was then that I realized that I had not heard any sounds all prior to that moment in time. I couldn't figure out how I was able to see the flying creature as I was in almost complete blackness. I had pain in my forehead. My attention was constantly diverted between my body in real life and the visions I was seeing in meditation. Is hell on earth being constantly aware of your body and its aches and pains? Pain in my right sinus over my eye. Maybe in heaven there are no aches and pains. Heavy pressure over my nose. Waiting, more waiting. I asked, how can I use this? There is nothing here to write about that anyone would want to read. I felt a huge energy shift and heard the words, you want to see it? Here it is. I heard the word boom as suddenly a huge expanse of pitch black opened in front of me as far as I could sense in any direction. There was nothing but rock and pools of fire. The temperature became exceedingly hot. The air was so heavy and oppressive, it was almost impossible to breathe. There was substantial pressure on my chest. For the first time, I noticed other souls near me. I heard the screaming of the anguished souls wanting any way to stop this torture. I sensed that it was futile to look for a way out. I understood that these souls had no cognitive thought, only utter and complete despair. There was no fight left in them to try to get out or improve their circumstances. The souls were in isolation and had no connection with other souls other than to hear each other's suffering and misery. I thought of the hell and brimstone described in the Bible. Yes, this all looked, felt, and sounded just like what I had read years ago. In my body, immense pressure was building behind my forehead, causing it to ache. Was this energy being stimulated in my transmedium channels? I heard, get out, coming from the spiritual energy in my transmedium channels. I answered, no, I want to see it. If you can't stand that I'm seeing this, then pull your energy from my space. I saw the photo of Nathan, a Facebook friend who wrote about the evils of Satan. I could tell that he was warning me to keep my distance from the fires of hell. Back in my meditative space, I was picked up and slammed against a boulder, my back taking the brunt of the impact. In the dark, I couldn't see what picked me up and threw me. Then I was being hit around the head with what felt like human arms with bird wings attached. I heard the half-human creature making piercing, scratchy cries. I was trying to fend off the blows. I wasn't exactly afraid since I knew I could end my experience at any moment. Had I been relegated to an eternity of this onslaught, I would certainly have felt terror as well as unfathomable despair. I had seen enough to know that I didn't want to stay in hell, especially not for an eternity. Pressure on my temples, hearing and feeling immense despair, pain in my forehead, pools of fire, souls screaming and crying, tingling across my brow. I started seeing more light coming through as I was being lifted up and brought out of hell. I saw myself moving back towards the light and back to the foot of God. I asked God a few questions. Is that what some people call hell? Yes. Was that the 7th level of the Cathedral of Souls? Yes. So now, on a much cheerier note, today we are going to be speaking with Ward Barcafer Jr. He is the author of Beyond the Veil to Heaven, which chronicles visitations from his deceased wife, Suzette. She talks freely about heaven and what it is like to live there. So I would like to welcome Ward to the show. Ward, can you hear me?
Yes, I certainly can. Yes, I can.
Great. Ward, thank you so much for being with us here today. Ward,
you're certainly welcome.
Thanks. Your story is fascinating. It's quite something that Suzette continues to visit you after her passing, and she answers your questions about the afterlife. So we're all interested in the afterlife and want to hear what you've heard. But first, when did Suzette pass away? And what can you tell us about when she first presented herself to you and what that was like for you?
Well, what happened is she had a brain tumor operation, and it was successful, but she was unfortunately on a stomach tube because some of the nerves in her brain had been cut. And even though we thought that she would eventually be well, she was in a wheelchair with the stomach tube. And what happened is after about 4 weeks in a hospital, she came home, and I started feeding her through her tube. But she was doing pretty well. And then one night about midnight, she awakened, and I knew something was wrong, so I called 911 and had her taken to emergency room in the hospital. And everything seemed to be all right. I went over there, everything seemed to be all right. But then the next morning when I went there, she was in ICU. And I asked the nurse, why is she in ICU? And the nurse said, because she had some blood clots in her heart. If we think with blood thinner, we could go ahead and she'll be well in 3 or 4 days. Well, a few hours later, her heart stopped and would not start. And so at that point, she went from the hospital into what I understand was kind of a rest home in heaven. She rested there for a while and then went from there on up to another level, and she actually ended up on level 3 in heaven. And so what else would you like to know about that at this point?
Well, let's talk about that first place that she went. So just to tell you a little story, when my mother-in-law passed away, she died of cancer. And 3 weeks after she passed, I had an incredibly vivid dream. It was one of those dreams that was so vivid that you knew it wasn't a dream, but that you were actually being visited or shown something from the ethereal realm. And I was taken to this apartment kind of place, this small abode, and this guide, it was a male, opened the door, and my mother-in-law was sleeping in the back room. And I went in, and she was speaking, but not to me. It was as if she was speaking to someone else. And I was told that she had been resting like this. Cocooning was the word that I was given. She was healing and cocooning after her long experience of being so sick here in the earthly realm and dying of cancer. So I was given the term cocooning. That sounds like what you're talking about with Suzette, that she ended up in first this sort of hospital rehab place. Does that make sense with what you're describing?
Yes, it does. It's my understanding from her that she went to this rest home right after she passed. She went to this rest home where, because sometimes people are so confused as to what's happening because they all of a sudden realize they're not dead. So then, as we think of death, so she went to this rest home, and then after a while, she gets out of the rest home, and then she goes into what she calls kind of quite frankly, kind of a little cottage of her own, one thing I would like to say, Ruth, would you like to hear a little bit about what happened to her immediately after she passed away?
Absolutely.
She says that after I was pronounced clinically dead in the hospital room, I felt calmness for a few minutes and knew you came, meaning me. You came in to see me and kissed my forehead. I was calm, in no pain or discomfort. I really realized more than ever how much you really loved me. After a few short minutes, I left my body altogether and drifted upward toward a light. I just dissolved from my body and leapt again, as I say, into a bright, dazzling light. I was aware of myself, who I was, and I felt unlimited joy. I drifted for a while like on a cloud, and then was deposited into another world, a world without form as you know it. I am still resting, and I feel like I am relaxing after my earth journey. We will see what comes next, but I know it will be joyous and thrilling. Very important, the vibrations of love between us are keeping us together. And she goes on to say, there was quiet at first, and an angel appeared, shimmering in white and gold, kind of like a mist. Then my dad appeared, and both of them said they would help me over the threshold of death and into another world, a world without suffering like I went through. Then a kind of door opened, hard to describe, and we went through it. And then there were a myriad of angels around me, showing me I was all right, and they welcomed me into their world. At first I was confused, as I had left the only world I knew, Earth, but as they welcomed me with shining light, a sense of joy and deep, deep, all-consuming love enveloped me, and I knew that I was all right and at home. Then I was led into a room of shining color. There were fresh, unbelievable flowers around me and in front of me. As I went into a chamber of unbelievable light and a feeling of love, I now felt like I was floating among stars and I could move wherever I wanted. So, Ruth, that's kind of the initial information that she gave me after she passed away.
So, Ward, when my father passed, about 30 minutes after my father passed away, I was given a vision of my father walking down a corridor being cheered. He was in a white robe, and he was being cheered on and congratulated by other souls that were also in white robes. They were cheering him on that he'd made it. So that sounds exactly what Suzette was talking about.
Yes, it really does. And one thing, if we have a little time, one thing I would like to go back and tell you a little bit about what happened to me right after she passed.
Yes.
What happened, Ruth? I had thought, my bringing up in a normal, ordinary, what I call ordinary church, I had thought that death was final. That once we passed from this earth, we were gone. There was no more of us. And so 2 nights after she passed, after I had left the hospital and she passed, I was sitting at my dining room table in my house doing some paperwork, and I had vaulted ceiling lights over the table at the top of the roof of the room. And as I was sitting there, those lights started flashing, just bang, 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 back and forth, and kind of like the lights on an ambulance lights. And this had never happened before, and I was wondering what in the world was going on. So the next night, I was doing the same thing. I just sat there, and the lights started flashing back and forth, on and on. And again, I wondered what in the world was going on. The next morning, I'm sitting in my home office very early in the morning, and Sue came through to me through what I now know is called telepathy into my mind with the words in distinct sentences saying, I flashed the lights because I want you to know that I'm not dead. And so that's kind of how it started.
And I know you have had so many experiences with flashing lights, things making noise. One of the things, let me find where Suzette talks, because I read through your entire book last night, and let me just say to listeners, if you have any interest in what is happening on the other side, in what is called heaven, read the book, Beyond the Veil to Heaven. It's available on Amazon. It's actually really fascinating. Suzette had said that the energetic vibrations in heaven high, and so for her to communicate with you, your vibrational frequencies need to remain high and lighter, so that she has to lower her energy to match your frequencies. She said it's easiest to do this at night when your brain activity is at a minimum. So can you talk about the whole piece about Suzette, how she manipulates things in your environment, like the phone and bees and butterflies, just anything like that would help us understand how Suzette comes to you?
Well, she tells me, and I had never really heard this word before, the way it was expressed by her. She says she comes through electromagnetic energy, and it's just waves of vibration that are throughout the entire universe, the entire cosmos. And so that is basically what it is. It's a combination of electricity and magnetism, which and actually the new quantum physics does talk about the fact that there is such a thing as electromagnetic energy. So that's the way she actually comes. She talks to me through my mind, through my consciousness, as I mentioned, in full sentences, because she was very bright when she was here on Earth, and of course still is very bright, and did a lot of speaking to groups when she was here on Earth, and so she has retained that attribute, and so that's why I really know who she is and who's speaking to me. She uses a vocabulary that is actually much higher than mine, better than mine, and that's another reason that I understand that this is who she is. Plus, she tells me this is who she is. It's very interesting of the way she does come through, and many times through manifestations and signs, I really realize that that this is who she is, and this is truly Suzette. One quick thing. One night I awakened at 2:30 in the morning, and she awakened me. It's very interesting. I had a little bicycle horn attached to her hospital bed that was in our main bedroom. And so when she needed to get up, when she was on Earth, she needed to get up and go to the bathroom or so, she would honk the horn. Well, after she passed away, I got rid of the hospital bed. I took the bicycle horn and some of her clothes that I really, really loved, and put them in a little cardboard box and put them in the closet. One morning at 2:30 in the morning, the bicycle horn honked and woke me up, just completely woke me up. And even though the bedroom was pitch black, at the very foot of the bed, against the far wall, in full color, I saw her dressed in shorts and a nice blouse like she wore, walking down the steps with a nice smile on her face. And that lasted only about 3 or 4 seconds, because it's my understanding that when they lower their vibrations, and I've raised mine, they can only hold their vibrations near the earth for just a few seconds at a time. That's all they can do that. So anyway, the next morning when I was awake in my home office, I said, "Sue, was that you?" And she came to me and said, "Yes, that was me. I wanted to show you in full color that I was still alive." So Ruth, this was just one of the very, very many manifestations that I got over the next year and a half.
So Suzette has said to you at times, if your vibrations are too low because you are sad or depressed or sick, I can't match your vibration and I can't come talk to you. Can you talk about that?
Well, yeah, actually, it's the Earth vibrations. The vibrations we have here on Earth are very, very low compared to the vibrations in heaven, or what she really calls it, her new world, her realm, her plane. And the vibrations on Earth are so low. And then, as you had mentioned in the various levels of heaven, as each level of heaven increases to another level, the vibrations get higher and higher and higher until the top level, the vibrations are basically the vibrations of God. And so she has to bring, from her third level, she has to bring her vibrations down as far as she can to Earth. And the only way that she can contact me is that my vibrations, when I first awaken in the middle of the night, are a lot higher than Earth's vibrations. So we kind of meet, I think, somewhere in between.
So she had mentioned, yes, it does. It absolutely does. You had mentioned in your book the astral realm. It was just in one short little snippet, and I don't know if you remember that, but the astral realm being when we're sleeping, that we can sort of leave our bodies, if you will, and travel, and they can sort of come down. Do you remember writing anything about the astral?
Yeah, I can, and actually this is really in the second book that is now getting ready to be published by Balboa Press, which won't be ready for about another probably 90 days or so. But what happened one night in kind of a dream, I realized that it was just kind of a dream and not a dream, but I was not awake. And all of a sudden, Sue was driving a kind of a little Chris-Craft type motorboat and on a lake. And I was sitting in the seat next to her, and she was driving the boat, and it was going pretty fast. And then all of a sudden, it hit a black wall. And then about 2 seconds later, again in what I consider my astral travel, that she was driving, the boat sped up, went a lot faster, and then hit another black wall, and then came out of that kind of like a black cloud, and then went faster and faster and went to another black wall, and all of a sudden came out into a beautiful, sunny, beautiful day. And we pulled up onto a bank and we got out, and there was a woman waiting for us, and she said, "I'd like to have you come down and come to my house." So we walked down this little bank and went into this woman's house, and it was a beautiful house, had all kinds of lovely flowers around the house, and she just welcomed us there. And then all of a sudden, everything evaporated, and I was kind of back in my own dream in my bed. And I think that was my first time of actually probably traveling up to where Sue was, and maybe even her third level. It was a very fascinating thing, and it was certainly a very realistic experience. I
understand exactly what you're talking about, because when I'm in meditation and I'm shown these areas, it's like, gosh, I feel like I'm in the real place. So I understand what you're talking about. Ward, what is the name of your next book so we can be on the lookout for it?
Yeah, the name is called Beyond the Earth Through Heaven's Gates. Beyond Earth Through Heaven's Gates. And the subtitle is Communication and Insights from Our Spiritual World. And the book, let me digress in just a second. Before Sue was even sick, back in 2009, I was sitting in my home office, and I had never thought or heard about spirit guides. And all of a sudden, again, into my mind came the verbiage that we are your spirit guides, and we would like for you to start talking with us. And so over the next few years, from 2009 through today, I jotted down their correspondence, their communication with me, and I wound up with about 60 to 65 long handwritten notes that I decided to write the second book with half of the spirit guides and half of Sue. So Sue's still continuing to come through, and the spirit guides are too. So the second book has about half the pages of spirit guides, what they were telling me from 2009 through today, and like I say, the other half with Sue. So I think it's going to be a very, very interesting book with spirit guides information, not only to me, but all their communication really is for anybody that is on Earth right now that wants to take advantage of some of these things. So anyway, that's basically the second book.
Well, I can't wait to read it. So actually, I would love for you to come back on there with us. Are you willing to do that and maybe talk a little more about your second book?
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. All right. So I would like to talk about spirit guides for just a minute with you. So Suzette talks about being taught by angels and spirit guides, and her spirit guides that she knew in the physical realm are with her in heaven, from what I read. Correct me if I'm wrong on that?
No. Actually, they are there in heaven, watching over her, just like they did when she was on Earth. The spirit guides that we have do not leave us when we leave the physical Earth. They stay with us, and I assume they stay with us through eternity, because when we transition from Earth to her realm, to heaven, as we call it, it's in for eternity, and I don't know if you want to get into this. We may not have enough time in this program, but at some point in time, people can decide whether they want to stay where they're at, maybe in the level 3, which is sometimes called Summerland, which is a lot like our summer that we enjoy here on Earth, or they could come back to Earth in another body and continue on learning a spiritual nature. In other words, they're growing in spirituality on Earth every time they come back, and people do not have to come back. It's a kind of a choice whether they want to come back and grow quicker in spirit, quicker than they can in their realm of heaven, if that makes sense.
Yep, it does make sense. And it's always validating when I hear somebody else saying the same things that I've been learning through meditation. So thank you very much for that. Suzette and angels, she talking about what they do with themselves in this other realm all day long. Well, they don't have day because there's no time as we know it. But Suzette talks about taking classes and learning things, and it sounds like the classes and the learnings are provided for the most part by angels. Suzette mentioned billions. I read this several times, and I really let the word billions sink into my brain. She said there are billions of angels. Now, I know there are 7.6 billion people in the world, so to think that there are billions of angels was frankly staggering to me. Can you talk at all about what Suzette spends her time doing?
Well, you got to remember that even though there's that many people on Earth, that heaven has been there forever, for all intents and purposes. And so, as people in heaven progress in spirituality, they can, as you mentioned, go to different levels, and as they go to each different level, with more spirituality, they eventually get to the point where they could actually become angels, God's angels. And so there's billions of angels because heaven has been here over eons and eons, and it's just been that much. One thing I would like to mention also, before we have a little bit of time, is validation. As I mentioned, I just had no idea that there was any kind of a life after death. And so when Sue started coming through and talking to me about what was happening to her, about the various levels of heaven, she was also talking about how they have their own houses, their own little cottages, they have their resting areas, and they do go to school. They continue learning. In other words, heaven is just almost identical to what happens on Earth, only they're in a completely different world. And this is kind of very, very difficult for me and eventually. But I find that after she told me each one of these things, as I read more books, as I came across more books, they were validating exactly what she said. There there's several areas that we probably don't have time to get into now, but several areas that I read that talk about the 7 levels of heaven. There's another book by a nun that passed away many years ago. She was in England, and she came back and talked and communicated to one of her friends that were still on Earth, and she was talking about what happened to her. She went to a resting area, and then she went into a little cottage, and then she, from that point on, started helping other people as they came through, and the whole book validated what Sue told me, and all these validations were after what Sue had told me. So once Sue tells me these things, then later on I read the same things in these other books. So it just validates to me completely that what's happening to her is actually happening to her, if that makes sense.
It makes complete sense, and I understand why it feels good to you to have this validated. Ward, can you talk about the 7 levels of heaven as Suzette has shown them to you, or described them to you?
Well, she basically, without reiterating what you said, basically it's exactly what you said. There's 7 levels. And that most people, I'd say 95% of the people that are on Earth when they pass away are good people. You know, we Earth is a learning ground. It's a learning trip, and we because we're human and have free will, many times we'll do things that we shouldn't do, but we do them anyway. And as long as they're not heinous type things, most people will go to the 3rd level immediately, which is, like I say, I understand it's called Summerland. And one thing I would like to mention a little bit, just real quickly, is there was an English Monsignor in the church that passed away, and he came back and talked through communication to a good personal friend of his that was still on Earth. And one of the validations, it says that the spirit world is divided into spiritual realms. They are giving numbers ranging from the 1st to the 7th. The spirits of the spirit world are arranged in bands, forming a number of concentric circles around the Earth. Another one, according to the Talmud, I'm probably mispronouncing that, Talmud, the universe is made of 7 heavens. In the 2nd book of Enoch traveled through the 7 heavens. And so also the Bible in 2 Corinthians 12, Paul says, I know a Christian man who 14 years ago was caught up as far as the 3rd heaven. So all these things are coming to me after Sue has told me these things. So it's validation on as far as I'm concerned.
So this is interesting. During the last 5 years, as I've been receiving messages from Spirit and the Archangels, I have purposely not read anything because I want to make sure that everything that I am saying is only from what Spirit has told me. So your book is actually the first book I have read in 5 years. So it is very validating to me to hear the things that you were just saying about things that people were seeing in the 7 levels in these different various sources, because I literally have shut myself off from reading anybody else's work.
Well, interesting. One thing I mentioned this English woman. Actually, her name was Helen Greaves, and she talked to her friend Frances Banks, who is also an American nun. One thing she says, quote, I am now lying in bed high up on a terrace that looks over a vast sunlit plain. It's a beautiful scene and so restful. She said, so this is death, life separated by density. That's all. In other words, death is life separated by density. That is all. Then she goes on and says, I am now occupying a cottage of my own with a very pretty garden, bright with golden flowers. And later on she said, I attend some meetings and meditation groups, and sometimes endeavor to reach the minds of old and dear friends still in physical existence. She says she finds herself in the halls of learning almost continually. So, again, this is a book that one of the first books actually I read after Sue started coming through that, again, validated what she was telling me.
Wow, I love it. You mentioned in your book the law of attraction and how Suzette has sort of a better grip on it and ability to use it than in the physical realm, but that Suzette is able to really sort of manifest whatever kind of landscape she's wanting to experience. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, what I'm learning now is from Sue is her world is almost identical to our world. In fact, it probably is more real than our Earth world, if you could understand that. She's talking about the fact that there's a density there that is so high that they actually use thought. They use thought to generate anything they want. They can think of their cottages. They can think of actually they can actually through thought continue to. What I'm trying to say is through thought they can go ahead and continue to have a human body just like your body on Earth, only obviously without the organs and the problems that we have on Earth. She also says that they can use thought to construct anything, but that we also use thought on Earth. In other words, everything we have on Earth, which seems solid, is actually thoughts through our subconscious or even subconscious mind. So anyway, thought, I guess, is the vehicle that we use down here, and the vehicle they use up there to create almost anything.
So the home that Suzette has now, I know she's got a garden, and I know she has spent time in the mountains and with nature. Do you know, can she see the mountains from her home? Do you know?
Well, she can see, she can not only the mountains, but she can walk in the woods leading up to the mountains. But one thing I do want to mention too, Ruth, is that she spent most of her time now going to class, just like the classes that she went on Earth. They have the ascended masters, which in many instances were scientists on our Earth that are now in heaven, and they're teaching classes just like the classes that we go to here on Earth. Anybody can, whatever their desire is, whatever they want to do, there's classes that they can attend. So it's a working world. It's actually a working world, just like our world down here on Earth is a working world.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's fascinating. Ward, you had mentioned the name of a book in particular that you were quoting. Could you share the name of that book again?
Yeah, the book of the this English woman, Helen Greaves, that passed away. That book is called Testimony of Light. Testimony of Light, and it was written about. I think I don't have it here, but it was written somewhere in the 1960s because she died in 1965, and so it was written by her friend here on Earth, Frances Banks. At some point in time after that, I don't have the exact date right here in front of me.
Okay. And Ward, do you have a website for your two books?
Yeah, actually, the website right now is only on the first book, and it will be the second book will be incorporated into the website once the book's done. But the website is signsfromsue.com. signsfromsue.com. And
I love it.
I'm a little behind on blogging. I've got to start blogging again, but I've been so tied up in getting this second manuscript ready that I haven't been blogging for many months. But I'm going to start doing that again.
It takes a long time to get everything that you're seeing in writing. I know.
One thing I would like to mention, Ruth. The title of the book, as you had mentioned, the first book is called Beyond the Veil to Heaven. And if somebody is interested in purchasing that through Amazon, they'll have to go through the whole title, Beyond the Veil to Heaven, because there's a couple other books that have started out calling themselves Beyond the Veil. And it's very interesting when Sue actually came up with that title, Beyond the Veil to Heaven. And when she did, neither Sue nor I had any idea there were any other books starting with Beyond the Veil. So I did want to mention that.
Okay, that's great. And Ward, do you have any last thoughts that you want to share with our audience, knowing that you will be coming back? But is there anything else that Suze would want to make sure that you are sharing?
Well, I think the fact that the reason the whole book started, the reason she came to me was the fact that she said that she wanted to have after death, that there was no death on earth, that once we died, there was an after death, there was another world called heaven, that God wanted us to write this book so anybody that was in a terrible amount of grief would realize that there was no death, and that maybe just like I did, that they could help eliminate their grief by realizing their loved ones continue on. And I think that's the message that this book is trying to get out.
I love it. That's great. Okay. So with that, that's all the time that we've got for tonight. Thank you, Ward, so much for being with us. And I had told the story a couple of weeks ago about how you and I actually met, that I had gotten a calling, if you will, to go to a particular luncheon workshop, and the only seat left in the place was right next to Ward. And he and I struck up a conversation, and it ended up that we had a lot in common, lots to talk about. So I do believe that my meeting you was divinely guided. So I'm so glad to see why I was supposed to meet you. So thank you so much for being with me here on the radio tonight. So if you're intrigued with what Suzette and Ward have to say about life in the afterlife, please find Beyond the Veil to Heaven by Ward Barcafer Jr. on Amazon. And thank you so much for listening in. It's always a pleasure to have you all with us. It is truly an honor to be among the hosts of International Angels Network. Please join us on Tuesdays at 9 o'clock Eastern Time for Diane Morgan with Angel Navigation. Wednesday's show is called Angel Talk with Sue with host Sue Broom. Saturdays we have 3 shows, one with Susie Parrott out of London, our second show with Shishi O'Donnell, and lastly, our newest host here at International Angels Network, Bernadette Garvin. I know you won't want to miss any of these shows. I look forward to walking with you with Spirit next Thursday, May 31, 2018. God bless.